You know the feeling, right? You spend all this money on a fancy security camera system. An incident happens, you go to pull the footage, and it's just a blurry, useless mess. It happens all the time. But guess what? The fix is actually way simpler than you think. In this explainer, we are going to walk through the exact settings you need to change to turn that garbage footage into evidence you can actually use.
And here's the crazy part. Security experts will tell you it's almost never the camera's fault. The #1 reason for unusable footage isn't bad hardware. It's because the most basic fundamental configurations are just completely ignored during the setup. We're talking about the simple stuff here.
So let's fix this once and for all. We're going to master 4 key skills. First, we'll learn how to freeze motion to get those crystal clear details. Second, how to balance light in those super tricky high contrast scenes. Third, we'll get a handle on the camera's lens for perfect focus. And finally, we'll figure out how to save a ton of hard drive space without losing any of that clarity we worked so hard to get.
Okay, let's dive right into the big one, shutter speed. I like to call this the motion freezer. Seriously, this one setting is the difference between identifying a suspect and just having a vague, frustrating blur.
Here it is, the classic problem. A car speeds away, you zoom in on the footage, and the license plate is nothing but an unreadable white streak. So why does this happen? Well, it all comes down to the shutter.
So what even is shutter speed? The easiest way to think about it is like the blink of an eye. It's the tiny, tiny fraction of a second that the camera's sensor is open, gathering light to build one single frame of video. And believe me, the length of that blank changes absolutely everything.
And this right here is the fundamental trade-off you have to understand. A slow shutter, something like 1/30th of a second, lets in a ton of light. That's great for dark scenes. But anything that moves during that time turns into a blurry mess, what we call ghosting. On the flip side, a super fast shutter, say 1,000th of a second, freezes motion perfectly, but it captures way less light, making the image darker. It is a constant balancing act.
So, the key takeaway is this. You have to match the shutter speed to the mission. For a normal lobby or an office, the default auto setting, it's probably going to be fine. But for license plate recognition, you absolutely must force a fast shutter of at least 1,000th of a second. If you don't, you're just going to get that white blur every time. And for watching fast hands at a casino table, a minimum of 1/60th of a second is crucial to see every single card. All right, we've figured out motion. Now let's talk about light. You know those scenes where you have really bright spots and really dark spots all at once? This is where a feature called Wide Dynamic Range, or WDR, comes into play. You can think of it as the great balancer.
Oh man, we have all seen this a million times. You've got a camera pointed at a glass door. It's super bright outside, but kind of dim inside. The camera tries to expose for the sun, and what happens? Anyone walking through that door becomes a totally black, unidentifiable silhouette. Useless.
The way WDR fixes this is actually pretty brilliant. The camera takes 2 pictures, one right after the other. It uses a fast shutter to get the details in the bright areas outside, and then a slow shutter to get the details from the dark areas inside. Then, it just digitally stitches them together into one perfectly balanced image where you can see everything.
But there's always a catch, isn't there? In this case, it's something called the WDR Ghost. Because the camera is combining 2 frames taken milliseconds apart. If someone is moving quickly, the 2 images don't line up perfectly. This can create this weird halo effect or a whole new kind of motion blur. It can be a real problem.
So this leads us to some very, very simple rules. For any scene with that tricky backlighting, like a lobby or an entrance, you turn WDR on. It's a must. But for situations where freezing motion is the absolute top priority, like for our license plate cameras, you have to turn WDR off to avoid that weird ghosting artifact.
All right, moving on. Next up, let's talk about the lens itself. We need to control 2 things: how much light gets in and how much of our scene is actually in focus. And we do this by adjusting the aperture, which works just like the pupil of the camera's eye.
The aperture, which you might also hear called the iris, is really just the opening in the lens, and we measure the size of that opening with something called an f-stop. This one setting is super powerful because it controls 2 critical things at the exact same time: brightness and focus.
So here's that trade-off again. A low f number like f1.2 means the lens is wide open. This lets in a ton of light, which is fantastic for night shots. But it gives you a very shallow depth of field, which means only a very small slice of your image will be sharp. A high f number means a tiny little opening. You get less light, sure, but you get a deep depth of field where everything from right up close to way in the back is perfectly sharp.
Now let me give you a quick pro tip.
If your camera gives you the choice, always choose P-Iris over the older DC-Iris technology. A P-Iris uses a little motor to perfectly adjust the aperture to find the absolute sweet spot for maximum clarity across the whole picture. For modern megapixel cameras, it is a total game changer.
Okay, so we've done it. We've got a clear, well-lit, perfectly focused image. Awesome. But we have a brand new problem. That amazing video is creating huge files that are going to eat up our hard drives in no time. So let's talk about saving space while keeping all that clarity we just dialed in.
First things first, let's just bust a huge myth right now. This idea that you need 30 frames per second or FPS for smooth video. It's just not true. Think about it. The movies you go see in a theater are almost always shot at 24 FPS. And for security footage, we can often go way lower than that and still see everything we need to see.
Get this. Just by dropping your frame rate from 30 FPS down to the industry standard of 15 FPS, you instantly cut your storage and your bandwidth needs by 50%. I mean, that is a massive savings. And for almost every security situation, 15 FPS still looks perfectly smooth to the human eye.
And this bar chart really just says it all. I mean, look at the insane difference in how much storage you need. Dropping to just 7 FPS, which is totally fine for a quiet area like an empty hallway, could extend your recording time by weeks, maybe even months, on the exact same hardware. The other secret to saving space is something called compression. See, your camera is pretty smart. It's not actually sending a full brand new photograph 15 times every second. What it does is send one complete, detailed picture. We call that an iframe, and it's big. But after that, it only sends these tiny little updates on what changed in the scene. Those are called P-frames, and they're super small.
The best way to really get this is with the hallway example. Imagine a camera looking down a long, empty hallway. The walls, the floor, they aren't moving. So after that first big iframe, the P-frames that follow are basically just tiny bits of data saying, hey, nothing's changed, just keep showing the walls. This saves a mind-boggling amount of space until, someone actually walks into the frame.
So, let's bring this all home. This little cheat sheet shows you exactly how to set up your cameras for 3 really common scenarios. For that lobby entrance, you want WDR on and a standard 15 FPS. For that super important license plate camera, you need that blazing fast shutter, WDR turned off, and maybe even a higher frame rate to make sure you get the shot. And for that boring, empty hallway, you drop that frame rate way down and save all that valuable storage space.
And really, that's it. 4 simple settings that can literally transform your security footage from useless to priceless. These aren't just little technical tweaks, they're the difference between catching someone and getting away with nothing. So the only question left is, which camera at your facility are you going to go fix first?